Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Astropath. Today, I have the great pleasure of having an opportunity to interview Laurie about her new book that has just come out. It came out on January 8th. It's called How to Read and Interpret a Birth Chart. There it is, Guideposts for Understanding Natal Astrology. I myself have just received my copy, which I'm very excited to jump into and read, having been the recipient of Laurie's wisdom for many years. It's very, very exciting for me too. But today, Laurie and I just decided that we wanted to do an episode where I'm going to interview Laurie about her book so you can find out more about it, what she was thinking when she was writing it, and what she hopes that you'll get out of it. So, Laurie, do you have anything you want to add before we start doing some Q&A?
No, you ask me some questions. Ask me anything, Jenny. I'll answer anything.
All right. Woo, let's see. Well, let's just start out with the obvious question. How did you first get interested in astrology? What
Oh
happened?
my goodness. I got interested in astrology when I was about, I would say 6 or 7 years old. And, back in the 60s, even in northeast corner of Vermont by the grocery store checkout were those little tiny booklets about astrology. And I remember seeing those symbols and I was just drawn to the symbols themselves. It was like, I have to know what these are about. And that began a lifelong obsession, I would say, where I spent my life looking for those symbols. And
Hmm.
I still spend my life looking for those symbols.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good point because that kind of leads into this other, like question I have, which is just like that time frame when you first became really interested, it was, quite a few decades ago. And I'm betting that things were pretty different back then. And it seems to me like we've been really encountering this huge resurgence in astrology, and you can kind of see this everywhere. So, based on all that, why do you think astrology's gotten so popular recently? Because I think it's a lot more popular now than it was back then. So, what do
Yeah,
you think?
definitely. Well, it's very different. Its popularity is very different because of the internet and how people are
Yeah.
able to access the information that they can. I think, the interest today is very different than the interest used to be
Mm.
because online, what people encounter is basically mundane astrology. People who follow astrology know when Mercury's going to go retrograde, when there's going to be an eclipse, people know when Pluto's going to step out of one sign and into another and have some sort of understanding of that. Back when I was studying astrology, there was just simply that information, at least certainly in my world, did not exist at all. We studied birth charts. I mean, that's what we studied. And, for me as a child, my interest really, I saw those symbols, but my interest really was in understanding the people that I had to live with.
Mm.
I realized even with just sun sign astrology, I could look around at my family. I was the youngest of seven, and I could figure out how to navigate my relationships much better with simply that understanding of their sun signs. And it really helped me a lot
Mm.
in the quite dysfunctional family I was in. It helped to
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that information. Yeah.
It's really powerful, isn't it? Even just knowing the element of somebody's different stuff. If you're a fire element and someone's a water element, just in their sun sign, like God, that gives you so much information about like why you might clash, right? Or what might be so different. So yeah, I really like that. And I mean, it seems to me too that astrology's really taken off partly because of that, but also because of this time period we're living in where people are trying to make sense of things and trying to understand, what's going on generally. And also I see more and more understanding themselves. So yeah, it seems like that's
Yeah,
really,
people
really
want
good.
to, we are complex creatures living in a very, very complex time, and we are all trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
And astrology is one pathway. It's not the only one, but it's a very, very powerful, powerful pathway to help us understand who we are and what we're doing here. So
And what the cats in your life are doing clawing your hand.
he says, I want more treats. I want more treats.
very simple. Well, I mean, kind of along those lines, I am really curious to know, like, what really inspired you to write this book? Like, what was it that kind of you were like, this is the moment, I need to do this. Like, what was it that
Well,
galvanized
let's see. I had been working on a very, very, very long-term project with some friends.
you?
And I am not the most patient person in the world. Having my moon in Aries, I'm kind of impatient. And I got to a point with that project where I said, I'm done. I'm done. I have to go do something on my own. And I really started writing this book as a collection of lessons for my students, is really where it started. And, I started talking about it as a book. Oh, I'm writing this book. But the idea of actually having it published, quite frankly, never even crossed my mind.
I love
It
that.
never crossed my mind. And then, I was writing for my blog and writing for social media and all of that. And a friend, a very dear friend who recently interviewed me on her YouTube channel in the Company of Cards, Erica Robinson, she said to me one day, why don't you write a book or something about that? And I said, well, I am working on a book. And she introduced me to her publisher, and it was a very long process. I started writing the book in 2019,
Mhm.
and here it is 2025, and it's finally in the bookstores. So
Yeah.
it's been a long process, but I never expected it to actually become a real book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love this because it was just like you had this, well, let's say this creative inspiration, perhaps nudged along by some frustration, but isn't that just the way? I mean, I think that some conflict can push us along into our path. But also, I really like the idea that you were just like, I'm just doing this thing and I don't even, this is just what I'm writing down. And there's kind of like this statement about how timing works. And it was your time. Like somehow the lightning bolt came down, whether you in the form of this woman who's like, why aren't you publishing this, and just letting you know, like, this is the right time. And if nothing else, I mean, you said to me before, astrology is essentially the study of time. And so it makes it's
Yeah.
this beautiful thing that comes together where it's this book about astrological time in a way, about the activations that come about in your natal chart.
Yeah.
um, or I'm sorry, making an assumption because I haven't read it yet. But anyway,
Yeah.
but I really like that. There's an organicness and it makes a statement in and of itself of what we're all doing with astrology, which kind of brings me, to that question. I'm gonna jump right into, why do you think natal astrology is so important for people's personal growth? Like it kind of leads to that. What shows up for you in that?
It's a mirror. I just think of the positioning of the planets at the moment of our birth really shows us, the way I think of it, I think of there being a river of time.
Mm.
And when we are born, one second of that river of time is removed and handed to us. And that the patterns and the positions of that moment, the gifts and the struggles and the challenges of that moment are ours to manage, work with, heal, enjoy, whatever. All that's in that moment is ours to manifest from. And to be
Right.
able to look at that, to be able to see ourselves in that mirror is an incredibly powerful way to understand ourselves. We're complicated. If we can sit there and we can say, oh, well, this part of me contradicts this, we can decide we're freaking crazy sometimes, But if you really understand the gestalt of the whole chart, someone asked me the other day, what's the most important part in the chart? It's like there's not a most important part in the chart. It's the gestalt of the chart. It's that moment, that the fullness of that moment that makes each person who they are.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
great. Because, not only is that just in and of itself a great explanation and reflection about astrology, but I also think doesn't it go so nicely with some of the more modern psychology? I'm thinking about the internal family systems, which refers to all of us as a collection of parts, and astrology can really show us that mirror of how we're a collection of parts. So I think it's very timely that your book is coming out at this time with these other modalities. And I know there's other things too, but that's just the one that I was like, oh yeah, that theory is. I know I found it immensely helpful, and it does go beautifully with astrology.
It
So
certainly does.
yeah,
Yes, because
yeah,
we are not one thing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
all of our parts, yeah, all of our parts have separate conversations. And yeah, that's what's reflected in the natal chart. It's pretty fascinating.
yeah. Which actually brings me very easily to our next question, which is, how does your own experience inform the book? This is just kind of, this might even dovetail with what's the most challenging part of writing the book.
Hmm.
But anyway, that's yeah. How does your own experience inform the book?
How does my own experience? Well, I guess just I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. My experience is that I can't even imagine my life without the understanding of astrology. I cannot imagine what my life would be. And I know that astrology has just allowed me to become so much more than I could have without it. And I don't know if that answers the question at all.
Mhm.
Um, but it's my own experience is that astrology has taught me to understand myself and to be compassionate and kind to myself and to other people.
Mm,
And that's what I really want. I want people to understand themselves and the people around them. Because that's right from the beginning when I found those booklets and learned I could understand my family. That's what it's about for me. It's that's really what it's about for me. It's not, and people who study astrology from the perspective of politics and cultures, that's great. That's wonderful. But for me, it's about the personal. It's about you and me and the people we love and helping us understand those relationships and ourselves.
mm.
I don't know if I even answered your question, but
No, you did. I think that's a
okay,
beautiful answer to the question, actually.
good.
And you're reminding me because, we used to make those astrobiographies, and I think we
Mm.
might make more of those at some point of celebrities. But I do remember in doing those charts with you, just like that's really what came across from you was this is a real person. This might be a celebrity that we project all this crap onto in our society, but this is a real person. And what might their background be like? What was their intimate feeling life like? Their private life? And I really think that that's one thing that came was really obvious to me in working with you. Oh, this is how these people come to life. It isn't just some symbols on a page that you're trying to put everybody in a box. It's the opposite. It's like how you bring the story to life. They bring the symbols to life, and I think
Yes.
that's an important thing you taught me. So
Yeah, and that
yeah.
makes me think about, um, when I work with a natal chart, I feel like I have this process, and the process is basically the guideposts that are in this book. I go through this process when I look at a chart, and there's a certain point in that process where I feel like I just get the person. I feel like, oh, there they are. I get them. And it's a very powerful moment that I have that experience. And when I was probably in my 20s or 30s, early 30s, maybe, I picked up my mother's chart, who, I had probably glanced at the chart sometimes, but I really started doing the process. And when I got that, oh, there she is, I didn't recognize it as my mother.
Mm,
And that was an incredibly powerful experience because I realized how much astrology fills in who a person is.
mm,
Like we have our idea of the people in our lives from our experience of them, but we're
mm,
not experiencing all of them. I was experiencing my understanding of what mother means. I was not experiencing this woman who
mm.
happened to be my mother. We can think, oh, I know my children because I gave birth to them. I know, not necessarily. And that's where the astrology can really help you see the fullness of a person.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. That moment of, my
Yeah.
mother is a human being.
Right. She goes,
Not just my mother.
right. And after that, I went and I took all my siblings' charts and I interviewed each of my siblings about their mother, our mother. And we
Uh,
all had a different, whole, total different view of who our mother was.
mm,
And none of them was all that close to who she actually was.
uh, fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really.
Well, at the risk of going on some tangent about the moon and mother and all that, that's actually in your book. I would actually like to just ask you, what are some of the guideposts in your book that you want to, explain?
Well, I mean, there's 17 of them. I think, it's funny. In some places it says 16, but there's actually 17. Probably my very, very favorite one is the very last one in the book, which is about dispositorships.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that people who are just learning astrology, it's all about the signs, it's all about the signs. But in reality, it is the planets that make things happen. And in the dispositorship guideposts, we really explore a way to discover the hierarchy of the planets.
Mm,
You know,
hmm
it doesn't matter whether you are a sun sign, Cancer or Virgo or Sagittarius, if the dispositorship shows that, I don't know, Mercury is your final dispositor, it's going to be very different than
mm,
if the moon is your final dispositor. And
mm.
obviously, a lot of people don't have final dispositors. Dispositorship is kind of yeah, we can't explain it in 5 minutes here, but that's my favorite, I think, of all the
Yeah,
guideposts. Um,
yeah.
but I talk, one of them is about the retrograde planets in the
Mm,
natal chart, the personal planets when they show up retrograde in the personal chart. Some of the guideposts are very directly connected to, actually, quite a few of them, to what I learned studying with Noel Till. Things
yes.
like idealization, what it means to really to be idealistic and how you see that in the chart
Mm,
and grand trines, different aspect configurations like that.
yeah,
But yeah, there's 17 of them.
yeah. And I know, I mean, I'm very excited to read your book, but I also know that I'm familiar with, many, if not all, of what's on that list and have used those techniques that you've taught me. And the idea here is you just get this picture, you paint this picture. You paint a picture rather than like getting real specific about this one thing or that one thing. You're just painting this picture and arriving, hopefully as you train and as you study and you work with these techniques to that point you mentioned of, oh, this is who the person is. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And I know the technique's very powerful. It's not as yeah, I don't know. Buy the book. See for
Yeah.
yourself. Use the guideposts.
Yeah.
But I think we have a couple more questions if you're willing, if you're
Sure.
up for a couple
Sure.
more. Okay. Well, I think in this vein, like, what do you think is the most important thing for the reader to remember when they're interpreting their own chart? What's the
Huh.
key thing?
Compassion. What's the key thing to remember when they're working with their own chart? I have no idea how to answer that question.
Hmm. You
Other
already did, I
than,
think.
did I?
Well,
Compassion.
just compassion, like being kind to yourself, so important.
Yeah, because you are going to see your warts. That's the thing. If you are really, truly, honestly looking at your chart, you're going to see all the best sides of who you are and all the hard sides. So, one thing to remember, okay, here's something to remember. Don't use anything in your chart as an excuse for bad behavior in your life. I hear people say, oh, well, my Mars is such and such, so I can't help it. Well, yeah, you can. You can use that understanding to figure out how better to work with it. I have an Aries moon, and I'll tell you, it was really a challenge of my whole life to figure out how to not be super harsh with people in my life. I think I still probably struggle with it on some levels in my personal life. But you can't use anything in astrology as an excuse for bad behavior.
Mm. I like that. And that really speaks to the idea for me of like everything being on sort of a spectrum. Like you have some agency in how you want to wield especially your emotional power. Doesn't mean it's all perfectly within your control, but but you can make choices in whichever direction you desire when put in the work. So, oh, I love that. Well, is there anything else that you wish to share? Is there anything else about writing the book or how you work with people now, or is anything about that?
Um, well, first I want to say I love to write. I just love to write. And I wish I had discovered that when I was younger.
Mhm.
And my process continues to be started in 2019, maybe even a little bit before that. But I get up between 4 and 5:30 every single morning and write. So sometimes after that writing, I'll write for 2 or 3 hours first thing in the morning. And sometimes I'll go back to sleep and then get up and have another cup of coffee and really start my day. But starting with that writing, a lot of people really struggle to find time and space to do this kind of work. And for me, it is that early, early morning when the whole world feels very quiet, and I can do that without it interfering with my schedule, so to speak.
Yeah.
As far as how I work with people now, my favorite way to work with people is mentoring people about themselves and their relationships.
Mhm.
Bring to me your chart, your loved one's charts, and let's play with the charts in order to help you understand these people in your life and yourself. That's my favorite way to work with people. I do some teaching, but I think of what I do way more as mentoring, and I'll mentor people that want to learn more and more astrology, but my preference is to mentor people about their relationships, actually.
Nice.
And of
Yeah.
course, I do consultations, which I love.
Yeah.
I love people. I love
Yeah.
people.
That's great. Well, do you want to share a little excerpt from your book before we close? Is there something you
Well,
want
I
to?
said I did, but do I? Let me see.
Sure, just give us
What?
that. I love that thing you read out loud to me. So let's finish with that, just to give
Okay,
people a flavor of what's in the book.
let's see where it is. Okay. This is in the introduction. Astrology, in all its forms, is a study of time. What people are learning online today consists of observing and understanding the moving patterns of time that impact us all. But when we work with natal astrology, we contemplate one moment in time as a reflection of one individual life. And although understanding a natal chart is entirely different from understanding cosmic cycles, grasping their connection is essential. To work with an individual horoscope, we separate the moment an infant takes its first breath from all other moments in time. We bring the pattern of the cosmos in that moment onto a static page where we can study the patterns and significance of that one moment, that one life. When an infant takes its first breath, the motion of the heavens pauses. In that moment, the pattern of the life is established and the stage is set for the life ahead.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah,
That really sums up so much
yeah,
about astrology.
yeah,
Understanding yourself, understanding what's going on now, how do those intersect?
yeah, yeah,
That's yeah.
yeah.
Well,
It's a
thank you. That's really
fascinating study. It really is. And you, Jenny Date, have been on this road with me for I don't know how many years. 15 years?
yeah, about 15.
It's amazing. We've been working together for 15 years, and it is such a delight. It's such a delight to still be working with you. So I am grateful
Yes.
for that.
I'm very appreciative as well. Very grateful to our work together. So, and it's been really fun interviewing about your book, and I can't wait to really delve into it, which I will be doing. So,
All right. Well,
all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for watching.
yeah.
Um,
Thank you. Buy the book and contact both of us, either one of us, for consultations, mentoring, whatever. All right.
and
Thank you.
Lori, what's the best way for people to buy a book from you?
Well, you can order it at your local bookstore. That would probably be the best thing to do, but you also certainly can buy it on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble. If you want a copy that is personally signed by me, contact me on email. Go to my website, lauriefarrington.com, and contact me, and I will send you a signed copy.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jenny.
everybody.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.